Hello everyone, this is Megan Vierick and I'm here to do a second set of videos to talk about how to make a scatter plot. So the first thing that you want to do is open up Google Sheets, and as I mentioned before, it's really good practice to actually make sure that you are naming your sheets in some way that is meaningful for you. So since I'm doing a scatter plot, I'm going to name this scatter plot examples. Please make sure that you name it something that you can find later. Just as I did in the column graph example, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our first sheet that they give us as default and we're going to rename that. And again, my recommendation is just to name it raw data, but whatever you name it, you're going to need to reference it to make it something that's easy and clearly understood. So what we're going to do here in our raw data is we are going to start to set up data that we're going to use. And again, the reason we have this raw data tab set up for us is this is going to give us all the information and we can continually input it in here, and then we will call on that information in a separate tab at the bottom so that we don't affect our raw data. So what I'm going to need is basically two columns set up. So what I'm going to have here is age of larvae, and I'm going to include here the unit that I'm using as well, because again, in Google Sheets you cannot put the units in the actual values themselves because then it won't recognize it as a number. So by putting it up here, we A, keep our memory set on what we're trying to do, and B, when we actually set up the scatter plot, these will then become our axes, so the unit should already be included. So for my one, I have my age of larvae in days, and then the second column that I'm going to have is distance traveled. And again, I'm going to attach units on that, and I'm going to use units in millimeters. So what I'd like you to do right now is just pause the video, add in your data, and then when you're ready, we'll resume from here. So you can see at this point, I've added in all my values, and when I'm going to come down here to the bottom of the sheet, there's a plus that says Add Sheet. So I'm going to click on that, and that'll automatically make a new one. What I want to do is I want to rename this, and I want to be specific as to what I'm labeling. So I'm going to right-click, or if you're using a Chromebook, you're going to use two-finger press, and we're going to go to Rename, and we're going to call this whatever's appropriate. The scatter plot is the second figure that I'm doing, so I'm going to call this figure 2, and then I'm going to add in just kind of a description for my part. It doesn't have to be the full figure title, but it really helps if I can have something that I can reference and go back to in case I need to pull or grab information from the figure again. So for this one, this is going to be age versus distance traveled. So you'll put in whatever makes sense, either based on your data, or if you're doing this for an assignment, based on the parameters for the assignment. So right now what we have is just a blank sheet, which isn't really helpful to us. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the values from the raw data tab. Now I could sit here and manually type in age of larvae days, or I could copy and paste. But what I want to do instead is I want to actually reference the previous one. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in equals. And whenever you type in equals in a cell, whether that's Sheets or Microsoft Excel, you're prompting the computer to do some sort of calculation or do some sort of work. So when we hit equals here, what we are going to type in next is we're actually going to reference the particular sheet for where we want to pull the data. So we're going to do that as equals raw data, because that's the name of my sheet, and I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to the cases for that. And then I'm going to put an exclamation point in here that helps the reference. And what I want to reference is the very first cell I have stuff. So just a little crash course, we can see there are columns that are lettered at the top, and we have rows that are numbered at the bottom. So I want to pull the intersection of the first column and the first row, so I'm going to reference that as A1. You can see here it's telling me an error because I moved away from it without referencing anything. That's fine. I can just come up here and type in A1, and when I do that, you can see I pull that information. And then all I'm going to do here is just widen that column so it looks nice. So what I can do is I can do the exact same thing. I can do equals raw data exclamation point A2, and I can keep going through. Or there's a little bit of a faster way to do this. So you notice when I click on the cell, it's highlighted and outlined in blue, and there's a little blue box on the bottom right hand corner. And when I hover my cursor over that, it turns into a crosshair. So if I just drag this down, it will carry that formula over. So you can see right here I've added in those values. So what I'd like you to do is set up column B, so it's referring to column A, however you choose that, whether you want to manually type them in or if you want to drag them across. Please pause the video and then resume when you're ready to move to the next step. So for this particular video, this is all we would need to set up for a scatter plot. In case you're interested in doing some other calculations, we won't need them to make the graph, but I do just want to show you how to do that. So maybe I want to get the average of certain days, since that's one of my variables. So up here, I'm going to have a day, and I have the word average, and I'm going to type in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, oops, excuse me. I want them to go across. So it should look like this instead. 0, 0, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Getting an average is really easy. You would just type in equals average. And then you'll notice it even tells you how to go about doing this. So what I can do is I'm going to show you two ways. One is a little bit more tedious, but it doesn't require as much in terms of computer information. The other one is a little less tedious. But it does require some more kind of initial setup. So what I can do here is I'm looking for anything that has 0. So I can grab cell B2 because that refers to 0, cell B8 because that refers to 0, and cell B14 because that refers to 0. You can see that they're highlighted and the color coding matches, and I can close that with a parenthesis. So that will give me 6.9. The reason that I don't recommend doing that is, let's say, for example, I go back to my raw data and I realize I actually counted this at the wrong date, and this was actually a day 1. So if I go look over here, my average cell would no longer reflect day 0, but the average has not changed. So let me show you a different way that you would want to do that. Is we're just going to delete this out, and we're going to type in equals average if. And what this is doing is it's saying, okay, I do want to take an average, and that is important to me. However, I only want to take an average for certain values in my set. So the way that we're going to do that, and you can see again, Sheets kind of gives me a description of what I need to put in, would be the criteria range. So what they want to know is, what cells am I kind of searching for to find some information? So for us, that's going to be column A. And I want to make sure it stays in column A. So even if I drag the formula over, it doesn't go to column B or anything like that. So we're going to use these dollar signs. And what these dollar signs do is they actually lock the particular thing. So by putting a dollar sign in front of A, I am locking it to say that this is column A. And I want it to search the entirety of column A. So you can see when I did that, I just reset it to column A, and now the whole thing is highlighted. Then they want to know the criterion that I have. So the criterion I'm going to have is going to be, and you can see in this example, they're showing you a statement if it were greater than 20, but I just want it to read 0. And then my criterion are going to be actually the cells that I would want to take the average of, and that's going to be anything in column B where that is true. So I'm going to do the dollar sign again to lock it, and dollar sign again to say that I'm specifying the entire column. And then I'm going to close the parenthesis for my statement. So you can see right now this is 5.9 because I don't have that value. But if I quickly go to raw data and I change the cell back to 0, maybe I looked at my lab notebook and realized that wasn't the case, the average will automatically change and reflect it. So I find that something really helpful to do. And again, we can either retype this all the way through, or what we can do is we can click and drag. Now you can see right now it populated everything is 6.9, which isn't very helpful. So what we can do is we can just come in here and change these values to a 1. We can come in here and change this value to a 2. We can change the next one to a 3, and then a 4 and a 5. And again, this particular thing is not very important for this graph, but as you're collecting your data, you may want to change your mind about the graph that's most important or makes the most sense. Or maybe you want to just compare at the end, day 0 and day 5, the very beginning and the very end, to look at them. So these averages, although they may not factor into your graph specifically, they may be helpful. What you could also do is you could have just an average on your scatter plot afterward, just to look at that value, and you could even put that in here as well. The very last thing I want to show you before I move into the next video where we actually make the graph is you'll notice that the number of decimals here is highly varied, whereas in the measurements that we took based on the probably metric ruler we were using, we were only able to round to 1/10 of a millimeter. So what I can do is I can actually format these so they look the same. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can see here there's decreased decimal place, increased decimal place, and more formats. Or you can go into format number and then you can change stuff. Since I want to treat them all the same, I'm going to highlight all of the cells right now. I like to go into format, number, and more formats, so I have all of the specific options available, and you can go in that way. However, for our demonstration purpose, I just need 1 decimal point, so then that's taken care of. Okay, so this concludes the first video. Again, the last thing I just showed you from cells D1 to J2, not critical for graphing, but just might be a useful tool for you to have. Thank you for watching.